Our founding fathers, and Thomas Jefferson was one of them, warned of what would happen if a private central bank was in control of issuing U.S. currency. We didn't listen. And as you can see from this Federal Reserve graph, there's only 4 cents of purchasing power left out of the original gold-backed dollar. That's the inflation that he referred to. Now, in August of 2015, in my technical opinion, we entered the deflation part of this trend. But according to the Bank for International Settlements and the IMF, the central banks are out of tools to deal with the next crisis. Well, I probably get, 30 or more reports from the IMF every day in my email inbox. And so I have to filter through them. But I'm looking to understand their focus and possible moves. And I have to tell you, after reading the report that I'm about to show you today, what they are proposing is the most significant new shift since 1913, when the Federal Reserve was legalized. Breaking through the zero lower bound is an October 2015 study conducted by the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Well, these guys are every Treasury Secretary, every central bank chief. So you could say that they're the guys that are driving this global economic bus. This research paper presents a new central bank tool that would empower central banks to drop interest rates below zero and eliminate a citizen's ability to preserve principal via cash. Further, it provides a template on how to quickly and invisibly convert the foundation of the global monetary system from a fiat paper money standard to an electronic money standard without the need of taking cash away from the public, government approval, or the limitations that are created by debt limits, all with central banks in full control.
The whole point of all of these webinars is to enable educated choices, because what we are battling is bigger than all of us. Without a doubt, I consider this webinar to be the single most important body of work that I have done in my entire career. The last time, what we're going to talk about today, the last time that there was a monetary standard shift was 1913. And I don't think anybody listening today, or certainly me, we were not around in 1913, but we're going to be around for this one. Now, you might be wondering, why would they do such a thing as to shift us into a cashless society? And you might also be thinking, well, I mostly use credit or debit cards for transactions, so that's probably not going to impact me all that much. But the problem is that if the bank started to charge you interest on the money that you held there, what you would most likely do is remove the cash to preserve your principal. Well, if suddenly the cash was losing value and you noticed it faster than the money that you held in the bank, the most likely outcome would be that you would spend it quickly. The central bankers and the governments are telling us that they want us to borrow and spend. That's not happening. But if you were losing your money that you hold in the bank quickly, you're more likely to do that. And voila, basically you have economic stimulation. So the paper that they've presented for their next tool, because essentially according to the IMF and the BIS, the central banks are out of tools, we're going to look at that a little bit more, is they need to break through zero. They need to take us to a negative interest rate, which means that you are paying to loan somebody money. And this is how they're going to create hyperinflation in the digital age. And it's a genius plan. It's absolutely genius. So essentially, let's go to the next slide. They have to, in order to go below zero on interest rates, they have to remove cash from the system. And let me show you why. First of all, interest rates are one of the key tools that central banks use to regulate the flow of money into and out of an economy. But as we all know, during the crisis, central banks, most of them around the world, were forced to reduce their interest rates to zero. And you can see right here that even those that tried to raise rates since the crisis have been forced to lower them back again and then some. So now many are in negative territory. On this graph, chart, whatever, you can see all of the red is in negative interest rates. So if you loan Germany money for 7 years, you will get back less principal than you gave them to begin with. You might think that that is insane, and frankly, it is insane. But it's because we're at the end of our currency's life cycle. 90% of the industrialized world's interest rates are at zero. Never before has that happened. They have to go to negative interest rates. This is a very recent report from the Federal Reserve, and they were comparing monetary velocity from the Depression to current. And it's pretty clear that our monetary velocity is lower now than it was during the Depression. Now, what monetary velocity is, just a quick little reminder, it's the speed at which money changes hands. So it is an indication of economic stimulation. And you can see it's not being stimulated. And their job is to figure out how to stimulate it. And they state quite clearly that the zero lower bound is a serious obstacle for monetary policy. They started to test this tool in November of 2014. So basically, they've gotten a pretty good idea of what the obstacles are for them going further below zero. In other words, making banks and people pay even more to loan money. And I'm going to show you exactly what that is. Okay, this is out of the Monetary Statistics Report from the Treasury. And non-interest bearing debt is currency. Okay, so dollars. Now, dollars in our monetary system are created from debt. They do not pay you interest, nor do you pay interest on them. Inflation is a different story for another day, but this is interest. And so if the bank started to charge you to hold money there, what would you most likely do? You would go and withdraw the cash and hold it in this form to preserve your principal. Well, that causes a bank run, and that is absolutely counter to what the central banks want. Now, like I said earlier, you might think, well, I do most of my transactions with debit and credit card anyway. Actually, globally, this is a report from MasterCard, and globally, 85% of all transactions are cash transactions. So it's not quite so easy to just say no cash. And in fact, in the US, 55% of all transactions are cash transactions. I was really surprised by these numbers, actually. I wouldn't have thought it was that high. But you can see to the GDP, the gross domestic product, the money that moves through the economy, cash is definitely still king. It's pretty obvious in here. And so they say, while the complete abolition of paper currency would indeed clear the way for deep negative interest rates, such proposals remain difficult because of how many people are still using cash. So what they really need to do is get you to volunteer your cash. What they have is history as a guide to tell them how to do it. Let's take a look. This is the plan foundation, or the foundation of their plan. And they say quite clearly, much as during the Great Depression when countries were able to revive their economies by going off the gold standard, all that's needed to empower monetary policy to cut interest rates as much as needed for economic stimulation now is to change from a paper standard to an electronic money standard and be willing to have paper currency go away from par. So what they're basically saying in this part, and I'm going to show it to you on a chart, but what they're saying in this chart, or in this part of this quote, is that this creates obstacles for them and they must eliminate those obstacles, but they want you to volunteer and they know how to do it. And they want this to go lower. Let's take a look. Real briefly, okay? The green line are dollars and the gold line is gold. And you can see that when we were on the gold standard over time, yes, gold maintains your purchasing power. And these two lines are absolutely in lockstep. You can see that quite clearly, except when we were during the Civil War, when we were off the gold standard. But here's the problem with the gold standard. If you were not happy with government's performance, you had the ability to take this and convert it into this, convert it into gold, thus removing gold from the system. That held politicians' toes to the fire. Plus, they state quite openly in other pieces, not in this particular piece, but in other pieces, that they want people to accept less money for their labor. But if you're used to getting whatever, you're earning so much money, that's what you think your labor is worth. So a fiat money system, the system we're on now, through inflation, you agree to work for less money. So let's see how they did that invisibly without anybody knowing about it. Because if they had asked you, hey, we want to take away your ability to hold government's toes to the fire, and by the way, we want to pay you less money, well, people would not have likely agreed to that. They would have gotten a lot of pushback. So this is how they did it invisibly. It's genius. It's genius. Okay. Up to 1912, a 1/20th of an ounce, 1/20th of an ounce backed $1. In 1913, after the central bank was legalized, that same 1/20th of an ounce now backed $2.40. So essentially, the central bank then had the ability to put almost 2.5 times the amount of money into circulation, which is why we saw a decline in purchasing power of roughly 50% as they were kicking off the fiat money system. Well, who would agree to that? They would have related it back to the central bank. But during this period of time, because of all of that new money, there was a lot of bubbles that were created and the average income tripled. Okay, if your costs double but your income triples, do you care if your costs double? No. Welcome to the roaring 20s. Of course, that couldn't hold because they were printing so much money. So by 1933, that same 1/20th of an ounce of gold backed $4, plus they took away an individual's ability to hold the government accountable, because for the average citizen, you could no longer take these and convert it into gold. Not possible. So done and done. Now, this part, as you can see, they look pretty parallel. And that's because other governments and other central banks could still convert dollars into gold. But in 1971, that ability was removed. And by the way, the first time that we had spot gold was in 1919, after the advent of the central bank. So now you're looking at digital gold, okay, versus the dollar. And even in these manipulated markets, a 20th of an ounce of gold still buys the same amount. It's held your purchasing power, even in these manipulated markets. So that's how they transitioned this money standard from a gold money standard to a fiat paper money standard, and they got everybody to cooperate. And I appreciate this piece because, quite honestly, they're telling you how they're going to do it again. They have tested this, and they know that the zero lower bound, they can't go below it as long as people can go to the bank and take out unlimited quantities of this.